Hi, everybody. This is John from Envision Robotics. Thank you for tuning in. I'm working from my home office today, but wanted to do a quick tutorial for you on dual filament printing. I am going to show you how to create a name tag. We're going to first design that name tag in Tinkercad, which is a 3D design program, great program for kids. And then what we're going to do is we're going to export what we create, and we're going to set it up for printing with dual filament. Now, there's no reason why you can't follow the same steps and create a 3D printed single filament print for yourself. Now, these name tags are great if you have kids and you want to put them on their lunch bags, put them on their backpacks, put them on with whatever. Even if they're going to camp in the summer, there's a lot that you can do with these. And obviously as an adult, you can put them on luggage or you can put them on your briefcase, whatever. And it's a good way to make sure that they don't get lost. You can certainly add a phone number. At the moment, I'm just adding my logo and adding the name of my 3 kids, just the first name with the initial of their last name. So let me get started. I've got a couple of examples here of what these tags will look like. And I've also kind of taken one and broken it down so you can see the steps, see the pieces that we go through. But as you watch this tutorial, you can follow me along as I'm going to go step by step. First thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to drag a box out onto my work plane. Now, personally, I like to work in light colors, and this is one of the things that I stress to the students all the time. I find it easier to work in a lighter color because you can see the contrast better. You can also see the numbers that pop up, right? And you can read all the specifications. But that's my personal preference. I just think it's a little bit easier to work with. Now, first thing I'm going to do, and I've already worked out the rough measurements that I want for my key tag. I want my key tag to be approximately 3 millimeters high, and this is something that you can experiment with to figure out what works for yourself, but I want it to be 3 millimeters high, and I want it to be about 25 millimeters in depth, and I want it to be 70 millimeters long. That looks pretty good. I'm also just going to quickly check to make sure that it's flat on the platform. So you can raise or lower using this little triangle. It turns red when you're able to move it up and down. And if you want to actually just can make sure you're on the platform there, you can go over and just change the value and change it to 0, which will put it perfectly flat on the platform. Now I'm going to go and drag a box because what I'm going to do for my keychain, and you can see here, is I have a little ridge around the side. And I like that ridge to be about 1.5 millimeters. I want it nice and sturdy. So I'm going to go and create my length to be 67. And I'm going to center this in a bit, and I'm going to create the width to be 22. And the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to align these just like that. I always like to make sure I flip around a little bit. When you're working in 3-dimension, you want to make sure that you view things from all perspectives. Now, if I were to group this, obviously it would create a complete hole, right? And that's not what I want. I want to have the base of my keychain to be about 0.5 millimeters high. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just lift this one off the platform 0.5 of a millimeter. Make sure it's not cutting through. Yeah, that looks good. I haven't, again, changed anything. I'm just going to make sure that I'm fully aligned. And I know that my objects are aligned when I see the grayed out versions here. And next thing I do is I click group. Nice. And I've got the base that I like for this. Okay. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit of a handle on this, and you can use like on keychains and that, they have the metal rings. If you have metal rings around the house, you can also order them online. These are great, and they're not that expensive, and they're a great way for attaching our key tags to briefcases and backpacks and all of that. So I'm going to start out with a cylinder. The dimensions that I like for this, I'm going to make it 16 by 16, and I'm going to make it also 3 high. And as I said, I'm going to make this the same color. I'm going to print this the same color as the base of my key tag. So I'm also going to change it to a lighter color. Now I want to have a hole in the middle of my cylinder here. So I'm going to make the inside dimensions to be 11. And I'm going to center this in a moment. And I also want it to be 3 and 11, 11. Perfect. I'm just going to make sure that I align these two. Again, I know it's aligned when I see that it's perfectly grayed out. Like this, I will group this. Very good. Okay, now I need to just take this ring, and you can experiment a little bit with the ring design. I'm just making this very simple today, just a simple cylinder. Now I'm going to just move this over here a little bit, and I'm just going to have it aligned. Wow, that happened quite nicely. It's aligned in the direction here where that ring is going to be centered. Now I'm just going to take the ring and I'm just going to gently just push it into there. I'm just going to gently push it into my key tag base. Now I'm satisfied with the way it looks, so I'm going to group this right now. Perfect. You can see that now I've got a key tag base and I've got a ring that I can use to connect it with a metal ring. Okay, so the next thing that I want to do is I want to actually add in my name. So I'm going to go over to my basic shapes and I'm going to look for the text. And I'm going to grab that and drag it onto my screen. Now I'm going to actually, because we're doing dual filament printing, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually have the name and I'm going to put my logo in there and I'm going to have them printed in a different color. If you were doing this for a single filament print, you can basically follow the same steps. As I mentioned earlier, we're just going to do a couple of nuances for printing with two filament printer. So, and in 2 different colors. Okay, so next thing I'm going to do, and again, I like to work in a light color, so I'm going to change this to a lighter blue. And next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a name tag for myself. So I'm going to put in John. And I like to leave 2 spaces when I'm printing with a name, especially if I have 2 words or 2 parts of a name. It just makes it look a little cleaner, but again, it's all personal preference. So next thing I'm going to do, and the default height for the name tag is 10. Now for a moment, I'm just going to show you a couple of things. I'm just going to make it 3 high, and I'm just going to squeeze it in here a little bit, and this is something you'll have to play with when you're using text. But for a moment, I'm just going to squeeze it down here and see if that looks okay. It does for a moment. I'm just going to drag it in, and I may continue to resize this a little bit later, but for now, that should be sufficient. And I'm going to just align this real quick in this direction. Now, if I was just to keep it like this, and I've made it 3 high, it will actually show through to the bottom. And so that's really not what I want. I don't want any of the name, which is going to be printed in a different color, showing. Now, you remember that we made the height of our key tag to be 3. And the height of this, the base here is 0.5. So 0.5 minus 3 leaves us with 2.5. So that's the depth of the groove or the hole, so to speak, in our key tag. Now, with the name, what I wanted to do is sit about 0.25 millimeters off the bottom of the plate. So what I want to do is subtract 0.25 from my height of my name. So that should give me 2.75. And if I still look now, it's still bleeding through. So what I want to do, though, is I want to actually just raise it up off the platform 0.25. So I'm just going to put in here 0.25. That will sink it into the base 0.25. I can just kind of see it there underneath, but if I zoom in a little bit, it should be also flush with the top of my key tag, which it is. That looks very nice. Okay, good. So that looks good. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit. And I've already imported my logo, so I have that here. I'm just going to make a quick copy of that, bring it over quickly. Now, this one here is 2.25. I'm going to just, and I want to make sure that it is the same height, right? So 2.75. I'm going to make this also 2.75. Okay. And I'm going to bring it over here. See how that looks. Maybe reposition that a little bit. And I want to also sync this into the platform by 0.25. So I'm going to change this to 0.25. That should be all nice and flush. Very nice. And yeah, look at it from a couple of different angles, right? Make sure that you're happy with the way it's going to look. I'm not going to add a period after my the initial of my last name. I'm going to keep it the way it is. But I'm happy with that, okay? So now, if I was doing a single filament, one of the things that I would do is I would just group all of this, and then I would export that and print it off as I normally do. So I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to go back. And I'm going to now, and for dual filament, what you want to do is you actually want to export, and because we're printing in two different colors, export two different files, right? Two different STL files for the moment. So the first one is going to be the base, and it's in a light tan color here. So I'm going to export that as one file. And then the second thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to, because I want my name, and I want my logo printed in a second color, I'm going to export that separately. So I will do that. So first off, and what I'm going to do, because I want to maintain the tolerances here of my name and also my logo, I'm going to just group those for a moment. And those are going to remain in the same color. And you'll see when we actually do the slicing in a moment how we'll align these. But okay, so the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to export it to my C drive. So I first grab the base, which is one I want to export, and I click export. I'm doing it as an STL file. And I'm going to just go to a folder, name tag, dual filament print. So I'm just going to call this name tag base for simplicity. I'm going to export that as one STL file. The second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to export my name and my logo separately. So I'm going to export that also as an STL file. And name tag, and I'm just going to put name, right? So when I'm doing dual filament printing, I have to export, if for the same object, I have to export at least two files. One is going to be for one color, and then the second one is going to be for the second color. And as I said, the base is going to be one color, and then the name is going to be my other color. So I will be back in a minute. I'm going to flip over to my slicing program, and we'll continue from there. Okay, so I've flipped over to my slicer program now. Because I'm using FlashForge, I use a program called Flashprint, which is the slicer that comes with the FlashForge printers. I like it. It's very simple, but again, depending on what 3D printer you're using or even the slicer of your choice, it might be a little different. But you can follow along on with essentially the same steps. So, okay, first thing I want to do is I want to load the two images, the STL files that I created. So I'm going to go to Load. And I'm going to actually start out by loading the name first. So this is the text plus my logo. And it asks me, do you, this model is off the platform, do you want to put it on the platform? And I'm actually going to answer no. And the reason is that when we did the export, we had it sitting off the platform 0.25 of a millimeter, because we had it embedded, if you will, into our base. So I'm not going to touch the the Z direction. So I'm going to click no to that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on my name here, and I'm just going to move it. And you can see that in the Z, it actually maintained my 0.25, which is what I want. But for the moment, I do want to have it centered, right? So I'm going to actually center it. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to load the base. So I go up to Load, find base, I click open, and let's just make sure that this is sitting. And with Flashprint in particular, you know that your print is, or your model here is right on the base. I'm just going to move it out a little bit. When it's dark blue, and you can see that there's no dark blue on my name and logo. But for the moment, what I want to do is I want to make sure I'm clicked on my base, and I want to actually center that. Now, both objects are centered, but you can see that it's not going to print correct, right? I didn't get the full alignment that I wanted. So for the moment, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab my base, and I'm just going to reposition it so that I've centered more or less my name and my logo, and I'm happy with that. Great. Now, the next step here, and you'll have a setting on your slicer program, which is going to allow you to choose essentially what filament you want each object printed. So I'm going to, and I'm clicked on the base here, I'm just going to go over here to my, it's called extruder, but again, it may be a little bit different depending on the slicer. And I'm just going to designate that I want my base to be printed with the left extruder. So I click on that, and you can see that it actually turns my object a darker green, right? And it's just the way that it's set up with Flashprint. Again, it might be a little different depending on the slicer you're using. And then all I need to know, right, or think about is that when I'm actually setting up my 3D printer, that I've got the color that I want the base in the left extruder, and then obviously the other color is going to be for the right extruder. Okay, so I've got that all set up. I've got my alignment. I'm happy with that. Everything looks good so far. Next step is to print this, and I'm just checking to make sure that I'm on the right printer. And I've got a bunch of different printers at the studio, all FlashForge, but I've got I've got a Finder, I've got a bunch of Adventure 3s. I'm just going to be printing this off in PLA, so I go and check that both for the left and right extruder. I don't need any supports on this. For the moment, I'm just going to print off in a standard color. It'll ask me a few questions around, do I want a wall? The models are off the platform, so obviously my name is off the platform. I don't want to, I want to continue slicing because I know that already. So I'm going to click yes. It's going to ask me if I want a wall. Now, the wall will be just like that, a wall around my print, and it's used to scrape off any oozing filament. I'm actually, for this, not going to do that. I'm not so worried about whether these prints are perfect. They're just going to be sitting on a backpack tag for my kids and that. But and I find that it actually is not so bad. I've done some testing, and that when I'm doing something like this, I don't find that there's much of an issue. But again, you can test it, right, and see for your own particular printer whether you want to have a wall around that or not. So I'm not going to have a wall around that. I'm just going to continue forward. Now I'm just going, for the moment, going to put it in the same file. Now I'm not going to call it name tag base. to print, name tag to print. And I like to keep track. I'm just going to put the inventor here with an underscore because, as I said, sometimes we're setting up prints for the Adventure 3, or we're doing the Finder or the Inventor. So I'm just going to put that here, and I'm going to click Save. It's going to slice my model. And you can see that this one here is going to take about 24 minutes. I can do the weight estimation here. I'm printing with a PLA 0.75, so about 1 gram. That's not very much. I am basically ready at that point. I can then take my file and bring it over to my 3D printer and start printing. I'll just show you really quickly here how it's going to print. Some of you may have seen this on your printer. Obviously, it's going to start out with the base, and then let's see if we can capture the moment. Yeah, it's almost too fine, but you can see that again, right? It's going to do the base and then start to print off the name and the logo as we work our way up, right? And as I mentioned, it'll take about 24 minutes, which isn't too bad for an object this size. A print this size. So I'm going to leave it there, and then I'll rejoin and I'll show you when it's printing, as well as I'll show you the final product. Okay, everybody, we're back. Thanks very much for tuning in. Wanted to show you what the final print looked like. We had a light turquoise and we had a natural filament. I'm quite pleased the way it turned out. Just a little bit cleanup needed, just with a little bit of an X-Acto knife to take off some of the little bits of filament there. But overall, you know, the print turned out quite nice. You can see that we have some pretty good detail in my logo, and so I'm happy with that. It's going to be going on our backpacks or luggage soon. So if you've enjoyed this video, make sure to watch the other ones we have, and we surely love comments and we love likes, and don't be shy, subscribe and check out some of our other videos. Thank you.